in an era where there are more indie authors than ever and more events trying to capitalize on our need to promote. Hello YouTube and welcome to my channel. My name is Courtney and this is Courtney in Books, where I talk about anything and everything involving books and sometimes other things. If you're an indie author and maybe even a reader who spends any time whatsoever on social media, you've probably noticed a huge influx of bookish events. Not just conventions, but fantasy balls in particular have become very common. I feel like I'm seeing new fantasy balls popping up every day from companies probably named something Knight or something Ravelry or Court of something. There was a time that I was actually incredibly excited to see so many of these events coming out because one, I'm a fantasy fan. I love dressing up. I love going to lavish events, but really I was excited because as an indie author, I wanted to see more events to get involved with in order to self-promote and network. It's a full-time job to get your name out there, and events usually are a good way to do that. Unfortunately, over the last year or two, there has been a new trend that I think we could all do without. Also, say hello to my new mug. I got this from the Phoenix Zoo, which is where I work part-time, and it's a little capybara, which we don't have at the Phoenix Zoo, but there was like a whole time where it was like the gift shop was like full of capybara stuff. So I got one because it's adorable. The first fantasy ball that I ever attended was by Fantastique Collection here in Arizona. It was their winter fantasy ball, I think in 2021, where I was first asked to attend as a costumed character because of my cosplay background. Once they asked me to attend as a character, I actually asked to be there as an author as well, and the experience was absolutely magical. I loved it. I sold out of my books. I was so grateful, and I still am, because their Arizona events have always been a great experience for me. For me personally, I had not heard of a fantasy ball like that before, and I was really excited and really nervous to get involved. I ended up returning the following year, and then the following year after that as well, I was asked to portray the Suriel from the Avatar series, at which time I was also there as an author. In the years following, I saw events showing up left and right. Tickets for these events is usually upwards of $100, and depending on the event, the location, and the accommodations and perks, etc., they can be thousands of dollars to attend. Of course, if you have the funds, by all means, get your party on, dress up, be in a fantasy novel for a day, have your experience. These events usually have a few authors or vendors who are able to sell and promote their work and be a part of the aesthetic, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. Not only does it add to the atmosphere, but it gives us as indie authors a chance to promote ourselves to a crowd of potential readers. And then of course you have the book events that also started to gain popularity with the growing pool of indie authors, and they started to pop up everywhere as well. Some of these events are great. These smaller ones have cheap booth spaces and are really just around to support indie authors like myself, and they don't seem to strive to be anything super elaborate, which is fine. Admission is usually very inexpensive or even free. Sometimes we don't need an event to be hundreds of dollars. Sometimes I think people just want to go somewhere to buy books and meet people, and with free or inexpensive admission, attendees have tons of money to spend on small authors. But not every story is a good one, and I think this very dark and ugly light started to really shine on events when one specific festival went absolutely viral earlier in 2025. And if you haven't heard of this event, you must be living under a rock, which, congratulations, because this event even reached mainstream news channels and YouTube channels that had nothing to do with the bookish side of the internet. Everyone was and still is talking about this event, and it's probably going to go down in history, but for all the wrong reasons. That event is A Million Lives Book Festival, which the internet has nicknamed the Fyre Festival of Booktok. If you don't know anything about this event, there are plenty of videos that have covered it in great detail, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but to sum it up, the festival was put on by Archer Management and promised a lot, but gave nothing. Basically, authors were misled and prepared for crowds that did not show up, therefore leading to a majority of them having spent a lot of money on travel, stock, booth expenses with no profit to show for it. As a consumer, you might think, well, they're just complaining because they didn't make any sales. Sometimes that is the case, but in this situation, no, because there were no consumers in the first place. Someone stated that there were about 30 people who showed up one day when over 500 attendees were promised by the event organizers. Being transparent with the number of tickets sold is usually kind of essential for events like this because it's a way for authors to gauge how many books they need to bring. When you know the potential number of attendees, that really dictates how much stock you're going to bring to a show, and that's very important for people that are traveling out of state or need to ship things. When authors bring books to event, we have to pay out of pocket to order those books. With trad authors, aka authors who are traditionally published, the publisher is the one that pays for all of these expenses for the books and all of that. As indie authors, all of that is on us. We pay for the books, we pay for the shipping and for books to be transported, and if we don't sell, we also have to deal with the leftover stock being shipped or transported back. In other words, it's always kind of a gamble and it's usually not cheap. Anyways, the number of attendees that went to A Million Lives Book Festival is just what I got from the videos I watched, so I'm not sure if they're entirely accurate, but from the various TikToks I saw, there was absolutely no crowd whatsoever. Not only that, but the book festival also had a lavender ball planned on the second day of the event. This was supposed to be a high-class, dress your best kind of event, much like the fantasy balls that I just mentioned. There are drinks, sometimes food, music, and immersive decor. The lavender ball did not, in fact, have any of that. According to a few different sources and photos of the event, there were just a few tables without tablecloths, some foam flower petals, no mood lighting, no decor whatsoever, a literal Bluetooth speaker that was placed on a chair, which was provided by a security guard who apparently felt bad for everybody. So he went home and brought his speaker. I don't know if that's completely true. I've just heard multiple sources say that he actually went home and brought his speaker over because he felt bad for everybody, and so he donated his speaker to the event. And I just want to point out that people paid $40 to $250 for this event. Again, if you want full coverage on the event, there are a lot of videos out there with a lot more information and a lot more sources. Truly, despite what a clusterfrick it was really quite entertaining to follow this entire situation. In the same way, fail compilations are very entertaining. You feel bad, but you can't really look away. This entire situation left people wondering where the money from this event actually went. Money from the authors who paid for booth spaces, sponsorships, money from whatever few attendees who purchased tickets gave to the event, though it seems a little bit clear that the organizer might have fibbed about how many tickets were sold. So everyone was wondering where all of this money went. And there are actually a few videos out there circulating where people actually did the math to deduce exactly how much money was made versus how much money would have had to be spent to create this event or to put on this event. And the numbers are quite alarming. From there, it all spiraled with what I personally think was just a slew of lies from the organizer. I did follow the whole thing for a while and it just seemed very, very sketchy. Everything that went wrong, which was essentially everything, was followed by a really weird excuse by the organizer, and eventually a lot of the authors started trying to get their money back because basically they felt lied to and they felt conned. Anyways, that really doesn't scratch the surface of the Million Lives Book Festival catastrophe, but I do feel like it was the catalyst for people to start being very suspicious of events following. See, once one event does it, people start to wonder if all events are doing it. I am not someone who has ever run an event, but I've been vending at them since 2009. I've been to poorly managed ones, I've been to events that were exactly what they promised, events that were overpriced, events that were total scams. I've literally been to so many different events and I feel like I can see the signs, and signs are signing these past couple of years. I feel like there should be a way to do background checks these days on organizers before we commit to involving ourselves. Nowadays, I feel like I can tell if an event is not being managed well just by the way they promote beforehand. I usually keep up with the hype around it. I look at how the organizers are advertising, where they're advertising. I listen to who's talking about it or if people are talking about it at all, etc. And every time I've gone against my gut instincts, I've been let down. As of late, I have kind of taken a big step back from events because it is getting harder and harder to find genuine ones these days. As with any trend, people are always looking to get a slice of the cake. When people started seeing how popular these fantasy events were, or just book events in general, with the ever-growing popularity of romance and fantasy, of course people wanted to get in on it and be included. And since indie authors are also coming out of the woodworks all over the place, there are so many of us looking for events to promote ourselves. And I feel like it's a little bit of an endless cycle. More indie authors equals more people wanting to make events to make money off of us and potentially readers, if they promote their events enough to even get readers to attend. And yes, I say they want to make money off of us as authors, and the reason I'm not saying they want to make money off of attendees is because lately a lot of events don't seem to bring in the attendees. So I can only assume the money they made was made from the booth expenses and possibly sponsorships. Anyways, this trend of half-assing events is just growing and growing, and people seem to be getting burned left and right. I feel like every other day something is trending on TikTok talking about another event that went very poorly. For example, I attended a horror convention back in October of 2025 that I was severely let down by because they failed to promote the event, and again, I went against my gut and I got burned. Once more, these poorly managed events, whether they are aware of how scammy it is or not, make their expenses from the money paid by vendors. Vendors like myself expect to make that back by selling product to attendees. That's usually how this whole thing works. If an event doesn't promote or bring in the attendees, vendors are left in a hole, but the event itself is fine. I also attended a small outdoor book event by an organizer I already had suspicions about in January of 2025, and again, I got burned. Luckily, I only paid about $30 for my booth because it was a pop-up event, but honestly, I should have just skipped it. However, the organizer promised that there would be a news station there interviewing local authors and that we would get some exposure. They also promised at least a few attendees. The news station turned out to be one woman with no cameras, no crew, no mic, from a news station who was basically walking around and handing out her business card. And I sold one book to an attendee, and I traded another book with another author, and that was it. I was trying not to be mad about it because the booth was only $30, but my fiance is always doing the math, and he pointed out how many booths were there and said that the organizer likely made about $3,000 off of the event and was banking on people not saying anything because booth spaces were so inexpensive. And I think that was a huge eye-opener for me. I mean, this person didn't even have signage on the street for random people to find us, and the parking lot itself was on a side street with absolutely no traffic, and I think about 12 people showed up throughout the day. That's literally not an exaggeration. I think it was probably about 12 people. So I have a hard time believing they did any promotion for it whatsoever. Which, as an event organizer, you have a responsibility to the vendors to promote the event and bring traffic. That's literally your job. And for something so small, you could have easily, again, put up small signs on the street that would have directed people on the main street into the side street where they could see that some sort of a pop-up event was going on. This same organizer soon after had done a poll trying to gauge interest for a fantasy ball that they wanted to put on, and only days after the poll, which I don't think is nearly enough time to gauge interest accurately, they had supposedly already decided on an event location and booked the venue and reached out to me to be a cosplayer at the event. I expressed that I wanted to actually attend as an author, and they proceeded to tell me the price of the booths. That's when I told them that if I'm being hired as a costumed character, I will ask for a free booth space at the very least as payment, especially if I am expected to interact with guests and stuff like that, which I was. She confirmed everything with me, and then I never heard anything about the event ever again, and that was over a year ago. She had even announced another cosplayer before the whole thing just went silent. This to me was just another red flag that put this organizer kind of on a blacklist for me. Another event by this same organizer just happened here in the Valley, but I have kind of decided to distance myself out of pure principle at this point. Am I bitter? No, I'm not bitter. Nah. No. Yes, I'm bitter and I have my pride. I don't want to start any drama with this organizer, which is why I'm not mentioning the name of the event. I know she has somewhat of a supportive following on social media, so who knows? Maybe I'm the only one that's had sketchy experiences. Now, imagine that kind of poor organization on a much larger scale, and you have an idea of the current event climate. These people are allegedly making thousands of dollars on authors alone and not providing the crowds and consumers to justify it for us. With no crowds, we no make sales. Without sales, we lose money. Most of us already broke. That being said, I have been incredibly picky about events that I attend as an author because of a couple events that were not up to par. If it's a first-time event, like I said, I keep very close track of how the event is promoting itself, if people are talking about it, etc. And I think places like Eventbrite should really make ticket sales public for people to see for this very reason, because if an event like A Million Lives Book Festival promises a certain number of attendees, there should be a way for vendors to somehow verify that rather than going off the word of the organizers, because they're not being honest these days, let's be real. This kind of scammy behavior isn't entirely new. We've seen things like this happen with the actual Fyre Festival, with the Willy Wonka experience in Glasgow, I think, the Bridgerton Ball a while back. There have been plenty of others that have gone completely viral for all the wrong reasons, and unfortunately this isn't going to stop. Where there's money to be made, people will flock, and unfortunately that seems to be what's happening in the bookish world. People will always capitalize on trends. We can't stop that. Right now, book events are trending. I think the latest downfall of a bookish event was Once Upon a Con, which is a whole other can of worms that is still trending, I think. So go check out the drama around it if you want to know the tea. Once more, this convention owes authors money, and not because authors were upset at the lack of attendees, although I do believe that was also an issue, but for reasons that I personally think are pretty dang severe. So yeah, I'm not really sure if authors are still fighting for those funds or if that drama is over, but it was a bit crazy. And of course, this isn't specific to only bookish events, but because that's the circle I run in, sort of, because I honestly try not to get too deep into any community for the sake of my sanity. But I do hear more about the bookish events than anything because I'm constantly looking for events to sell my books at. And I really have distanced myself from the cosplay and general convention scene the last couple of years, so I don't hear as much about those as I used to. I do still love to vend at conventions fairly regularly, but that's all it is. I'm a vendor and I typically choose shows that are established or shows that I already know handle themselves very well, because I want to make a profit and not dig myself in a hole because an event was poorly planned. If I'm being transparent, events are quite costly and a lot of work goes into vending at them. A majority of my money as an author comes from my online presence, and while I do see the benefits of going to events to meet people face to face and to sell physical copies of my books, the efforts of getting my books, preparing the merchandise, the expenses of getting the product in the first place, blocking out the day or even a weekend to sell your books, etc., sometimes I don't see the benefit. That's entirely something personal to me. Some authors make most of their profits, if not all of their profits, from shows and selling physical books firsthand, but my lifestyle doesn't really support attending them that often. When it comes to my horror art, which if you didn't already know, I do horror, like art that is centered around horror, I don't really sell online, and I do notice that people don't want to buy art online, despite them always asking me at conventions if I sell online. I really don't sell any of that online. That is all done in person at shows. So something like that is more beneficial to me. But again, when it comes to my books, it just costs a lot of the time so much to just attend the show and set up and get product that like the profit margin is so much lower than other shows that I attend. So it just, sometimes I have to weigh my pros and cons, you know? And there is that fear of attending an event that's looking to profit off of me as an indie author rather than the attendees. That's alarming. And of course, as an attendee who's paying for tickets to these events, you want to know that the event is going to deliver on what you've paid for, which from that perspective, things also aren't looking too great. Organizers are charging more and more and providing less and less. It's getting harder and harder to find honest events. It requires a lot of asking around and doing research to find out what other people's experiences have been. I tend to look up if an organizer has put on an event before to see if they have any experience, but that's not always successful. I weigh the price of the booth, the venue, the travel. Yes, it's a lot. But a lot of indie authors don't have money to attend a bad show. These shows to a lot of us are an investment, and while investments don't always pay off, and we all understand that, hopefully, when a show is blatantly built on deceptions, we're not just being lied to, we are being used. And in the case of A Million Lives Book Festival, a lot of authors, after selling near to nothing at this actual festival, were left in a lot of debt because Crazy enough, like I said, money to buy booths, travel, buy books, and potentially ship books costs quite a bit. I genuinely wonder if these event organizers go into it trying to scam us all and thinking they can get away with it, or if they're just really bad at event planning and just genuinely didn't expect it to go that way. I mean, either way, it turns into a scam. Don't do that. It's crappy. If you're just inexperienced, maybe start smaller. If you're not prepared for what goes into it, don't do it, because people are wising up. I hope. I know people are starting to or have at least threatened lawsuits against some of the latest events. If that trend continues, who knows? Maybe we will get more honest events. Or maybe not. I don't know. I'm not the person to do market predictions or anything like that. I am not that smart. That requires a lot more research. But I do hope that we can weed out the scammy events and clean up our rosters, because it's kind of getting out of hand. You know, I got excited there for a while thinking there were more bookish events where I could promote myself, and it's turning out that misses are more common than hits, and that's a shame. Anyways, if you're an indie author just getting started in the event scene, my advice to you is to do your research on these events. Don't just get a booth at any event and think that it's all going to turn out good. It doesn't always. Even with well-established events, it doesn't always turn out like, you know, with you walking away with tons of money. It just doesn't, it's a hit or miss all the time. But in doing your research, you might be able to lower the odds of an event going really badly. Work within your budget. If you happen to have the money to lose and want to take your chance on some of these sketchy events, that's your prerogative. But if you don't have the funds, be very careful about who you trust, because bad shows are becoming a growing trend. Anyways, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to like this video, that helps me out a lot, and subscribing also helps me out. So if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. I would love that. I'm trying to get to 5,000 subscribers, and I would love to do that within this year. Tell me your bookish event successes, or if you have horror stories, I would love to hear about those in the comments below. That would be an interesting video, just kind of reading all of your bookish event horror stories. Anyways, I hope you are all having a good day or night, and until my next video, happy reading or writing. Bye!